The text message that destroyed my marriage arrived while I was fixing our leaky kitchen faucet at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. "Can't wait to feel you inside me again tomorrow," it read, followed by 3 fire emojis and a winking face. The message wasn't meant for me. My name is Evan Masters, and until that moment, I thought I was living a pretty decent life. 41 years old, steady job as an IT systems analyst, 2 teenage kids who only occasionally treated me like I was completely worthless, and a wife who still looked good enough that other men noticed her at restaurants. Sure, Marta had been distant lately, working late at her marketing firm downtown, but I figured that was just the natural evolution of a 17-year marriage. I was wrong about a lot of things. The phone had buzzed on the counter next to where I was wrestling with the stubborn pipe fitting, and I'd glanced over expecting to see my usual late-night text from Marta about picking up milk or remembering to take out the garbage. Instead, I found myself staring at a message that made my stomach drop like I'd just stepped off a cliff. The sender was listed as S with a heart emoji. "Real subtle, Marta." I set down my wrench with hands that had suddenly started shaking and picked up the phone, my wife's phone, the phone she'd left charging in the kitchen while she took what she called her essential evening bath ritual upstairs. The phone that apparently contained an entire secret life I knew nothing about. "Evan?" Marta's voice drifted down from upstairs. "Is everything okay down there?" I heard something drop. "Just the wrench," I called back, surprised at how normal my voice sounded. "Almost got this thing fixed." But I hadn't dropped the wrench. What I'd dropped was every assumption I'd made about my life for the past God knows how long. I scrolled up through the message thread with trembling fingers. What I found made me want to punch a hole through the wall. Months of messages. Months of planning secret meetings, sharing intimate photos, and discussing me like I was some pathetic obstacle to their happiness. "Poor Evan has no idea," one message from 3 weeks ago read. "He actually asked if I wanted to go to his company picnic next weekend. Can you imagine? I told him I had to work." S had responded with laughing emojis and, "Your husband sounds like a real catch. Does he still wear those awful polo shirts? Every single day, and he tucks them in with a belt. I swear I married my father." I remembered that weekend. I'd gone to the company picnic alone and told everyone Marta was swamped with a big client presentation. I'd actually felt proud of her dedication to her career. The bathroom door opened upstairs, and I heard Marta's footsteps heading toward our bedroom. I quickly scrolled back to the most recent message and set the phone down exactly where she'd left it, then picked up my wrench and pretended to focus on the faucet. "How's it going down there?" she asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway wearing her favorite silk robe, the one I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. The one she was probably wearing in some of those photos she'd been sending to S. "Almost done," I said without looking up. "Should have water pressure back to normal by tomorrow." She moved closer, and I caught a whiff of her expensive body lotion, the same scent that used to drive me crazy when we were dating. Now it just smelled like lies. "You're so good at fixing things," she said, running her hand across my shoulders. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it. Here she was, playing the loving wife, while her phone sat 3 feet away containing evidence of months of betrayal. I wanted to grab the phone and shove it in her face. I wanted to scream and demand answers and ask her how long she'd been making a fool out of me. Instead, I just nodded and kept working on the faucet. "I'm heading to bed," she said, kissing the top of my head like she had 1,000 times before. "Don't stay up too late with that thing." She grabbed her phone and headed upstairs, probably to send S a goodnight message about how her clueless husband was fixing the plumbing while she planned their next romantic encounter. I finished the faucet repair in a daze, testing the water pressure and cleaning up my tools like I was on autopilot. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd discovered and figure out what the hell I was supposed to do about it. 17 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, a life built together that apparently meant nothing to the woman sleeping in my bed upstairs. I sat at the kitchen table with a beer and tried to think rationally. Maybe I'd misunderstood something. Maybe there was an explanation that didn't involve my wife cheating on me with some guy who made fun of my polo shirts. But deep down, I knew better. The messages were too detailed, too intimate, too cruel to be anything other than what they appeared to be. My wife was having an affair, and from the looks of it, she was having the time of her life doing it. I finished my beer and headed upstairs, where Marta was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling and listening to her breathe, wondering how many other nights she'd fallen asleep thinking about someone else. The next morning, everything looked different. The coffee tasted bitter. The newspaper felt heavier. Even the sunlight coming through the kitchen window seemed harsh and unforgiving. Marta came downstairs dressed for work in an outfit I didn't recognize. A tight black dress that showed more cleavage than her usual professional attire, paired with heels that made her legs look incredible. "New dress?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "This old thing?" She smoothed the fabric over her hips. "I've had it forever. Just haven't worn it in a while." Another lie. The dress still had the tags tucked discreetly inside the neckline. I could see them when she leaned over to pour her coffee. "You look beautiful," I said, and meant it. That was the worst part. Even knowing what I knew, she was still the most attractive woman I'd ever been with. "Thank you, honey." She kissed my cheek and grabbed her purse. "I might be late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow, and the team wants to go over everything one more time." "Of course they do," I said. She paused at the door and looked back at me with what might have been guilt or might have been my imagination. "I love you, Evan," she said. "I love you too," I replied automatically. And the terrible thing was, it was still true. After she left, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee that tasted like ashes and trying to figure out what kind of man I was going to be. The kind who confronted his wife and demanded the truth. The kind who hired a private investigator and gathered evidence? The kind who pretended he'd never seen those messages and hoped the affair would burn itself out? Or maybe I was going to be a different kind of man entirely. The phone call came that afternoon while I was pretending to work at my desk downtown. My concentration had been shot all day, and I'd spent most of my time staring at spreadsheets without actually seeing them. "Evan? It's Victoria, Marta's older sister. The one who'd been recently divorced from her investment banker husband after catching him with his 25-year-old assistant. The one who'd been staying in our guest room for the past 2 weeks while she figured things out. Hey, Victoria, what's up? I was wondering if you could pick up some groceries on your way home. Marta mentioned she might be working late again, and I thought I'd cook dinner for you and the kids." The thoughtfulness should have been touching. Instead, it felt like another layer of deception. Victoria knew about the affair. I was suddenly certain of it. The way she'd been looking at me lately, with what I'd interpreted as sympathy for having to deal with her divorce drama, now seemed like pity for being a clueless husband. "That's really nice of you," I said. "What did you have in mind? How about that pasta dish you like? The one with the mushrooms and cream sauce?" She was trying too hard. Victoria had never cooked for us before, not once in the 2 weeks she'd been staying with us. This sudden domestic gesture felt like guilt, or worse, like she was trying to soften me up for something. "Sounds great," I said. "I'll stop at the store." "Thanks, Evan. You're such a good guy. Marta's lucky to have you." The words hit me like a slap. If Victoria thought Marta was lucky to have me, why hadn't she tried to stop her sister from cheating? Why was she sitting at our dinner table every night, making small talk and pretending everything was normal? I left work early and drove to the grocery store in a fog of anger and confusion. The familiar routine of pushing a cart through the aisles and checking items off a list felt surreal, like I was playing the role of a normal husband in a play where everyone else knew the ending except me. When I got home, Victoria was in the kitchen with my 15-year-old daughter Amelia, both of them laughing about something on Amelia's phone. My 17-year-old son Ross was nowhere to be seen. probably in his room playing video games and avoiding human interaction like any normal teenager. "Dad!" Amelia looked up as I walked in with the grocery bags. "Aunt Victoria was just telling me about her new apartment. It sounds amazing." "Oh, you found a place?" I set the bags on the counter and started unpacking them. Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "Well, not exactly found. More like," looking seriously. "She's going to get a place downtown," Amelia continued excitedly, "with exposed brick walls and huge windows. It's going to be so cool." I caught Victoria's eye and saw something that looked like panic. She was broke. The divorce had left her with almost nothing, and she couldn't afford an apartment downtown or anywhere else. She was stuck with us indefinitely, which meant she had a front-row seat to watch her sister's marriage implode. "That does sound cool," I said to Amelia. "Why don't you go get started on your homework while your aunt and I get dinner ready?" "Do I have to?" We were having fun. "Homework first. You can hang out more after dinner." Amelia rolled her eyes but headed upstairs, leaving Victoria and me alone in the kitchen. The silence stretched between us as I continued unpacking groceries, and she pretended to be fascinated by the recipe she'd pulled up on her phone. "Victoria," I said finally, "how long have you known?" She looked up sharply, her face going pale. "Known what?" "About Marta and whoever she's seeing." The phone slipped from her hands and clattered onto the counter. She stared at me with wide eyes, opening and closing her mouth like a fish out of water. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, but her voice was shaky and unconvincing. "Come on, you're living in our house. You see her getting dressed up for work meetings and coming home late with her makeup smudged. You're not stupid, and neither am I." Victoria sat down heavily at the kitchen table and put her head in her hands. "Oh God, Evan. I'm so sorry." The confirmation hit me harder than I'd expected. Hearing it out loud made it real in a way that seeing those text messages hadn't quite managed. "How long?" I asked. "A few months, I think, maybe longer. I don't know all the details." "But you know some details." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. What was I supposed to do? "She's my sister, and after everything I've been through with David, I couldn't be the one to blow up another marriage. So, you decided to just let me be the idiot husband who doesn't know his wife is cheating on him?" I kept hoping she'd come to her senses. That it would just be a phase, you know? A midlife crisis thing that would burn out. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. A phase. Right. Like she's experimenting with a new hairstyle. "Evan, please. I know how this looks, but I was trying to protect everyone. The kids, you, even Marta. I thought if I could just get her to see what she was throwing away." "Did you try? Did you actually talk to her about it?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. "So you just sat at our dinner table every night watching me be a fool and said nothing?" "It wasn't like that." "What was it like, Victoria? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you decided your loyalty to your cheating sister was more important than basic human decency." She started crying then, big ugly sobs that shook her whole body. Part of me felt bad for making her cry. She was going through her own hell with the divorce, and I knew she genuinely cared about our family. But a bigger part of me was furious. Furious that she'd watched me kiss my wife goodbye every morning, knowing Marta was planning to spend the day with someone else. Furious that she'd sat through family dinners and game nights and school events, all while keeping this massive secret. "Who is he?" I asked when her crying subsided. "Her boss, Shaun Beck." The name hit me like a physical blow. I knew Shaun Beck. I'd met him at company parties and office events. He was divorced, good-looking in that expensive suit and perfect teeth way, and about 10 years younger than me. He drove a Tesla and lived in one of those trendy downtown lofts that cost more per month than I made in 3. Of course it was Shaun Beck. "How did you find out?" Victoria asked, wiping her eyes with a dish towel. I saw some text messages on her phone last night. Oh God, what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? Confront Marta? Demand she end the affair? File for divorce? Try to pretend I'd never seen those messages? I don't know yet, I said honestly. Maybe you could talk to her. Try counseling or something. People get through affairs all the time. I stared at Victoria, wondering if she really believed what she was saying, or if she was just desperate to avoid being responsible for the collapse of another marriage. Did you try counseling with David? I asked. Her face crumpled. That's different. It was different. How? He was cruel about it. Flaunted it. Made me feel like I was crazy for being upset. And Marta's affair is somehow more acceptable because she's being discreet about it? No, that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She didn't have an answer for that, which was probably for the best. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her try to justify her sister's betrayal. The front door opened, and we heard Marta's voice calling out a greeting. Victoria and I looked at each other, and I saw my own panic reflected in her eyes. We're in the kitchen, I called back, trying to sound normal. Marta appeared in the doorway, still wearing that tight black dress, but now her hair was slightly messed up, and her lipstick was gone. She looked beautiful and guilty, and completely unaware that her world was about to change. Something smells good, she said, kissing my cheek. Victoria, are you cooking? Just getting started, Victoria said, not meeting her sister's eyes. How was your presentation prep? I asked. Oh, you know how it is. Lots of last-minute changes and perfectionist clients, but I think we're in good shape for tomorrow. Another lie, delivered with the same casual confidence as all the others. I wondered how many lies I'd accepted over the past few months without questioning them. Well, I'm going to change clothes, and then I'll help with dinner, Marta said. After she left, Victoria looked at me pleadingly. Please don't say anything tonight. Not with the kids here. I wanted to argue, but she was right. Ross and Amelia didn't deserve to have their family implode over pasta and salad. They deserved better than that. Fine, I said. But this conversation isn't over. Victoria nodded gratefully and turned back to the stove, but I could see her hands shaking as she stirred the sauce. Dinner was surreal. Marta chatted about her day, carefully editing out any mention of Shaun Beck. Victoria pushed food around her plate and avoided eye contact with everyone. The kids complained about school and argued about whose turn it was to load the dishwasher, blissfully unaware that their parents' marriage was disintegrating right in front of them. I played my part, asking about homework and making dad jokes that earned the usual groans and eye rolls. But inside, I felt like I was watching someone else's life through a window. After dinner, Marta went upstairs to take a phone call from a client in California. Victoria disappeared into the guest room, claiming she had a headache. I helped the kids with their homework and tried to act like everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore, and I was starting to realize it never would be again. 3 days passed before I worked up the courage to look at Marta's phone again. 3 days of watching her get dressed up for work, of listening to her make excuses for late meetings and weekend obligations, of pretending I believed every word she said. The opportunity came on Friday night when she left her phone charging in the kitchen while she took a shower. I told myself I was just going to check once more to see if maybe I'd misunderstood something or if the affair had ended. What I found instead was evidence that things were getting worse. The messages with S had become more frequent and more explicit. They were planning a weekend getaway to some bed and breakfast in the mountains. They were discussing how much they loved each other. They were making fun of me with increasing cruelty. Evan asked if I wanted to go see a movie this weekend, Marta had written the day before. I told him I had to work. He actually looked disappointed. It's almost sad how clueless he is. Poor guy, Shaun had replied. Maybe you should throw him a bone once in a while. Take him to a movie next weekend. Ugh, can you imagine? 2 hours of him trying to hold my hand and whisper commentary about the plot. I'd rather have root canal surgery. Well, after this weekend, you won't have to worry about it much longer. That last message made my blood run cold. What did he mean? She wouldn't have to worry about it much longer? Were they planning to run away together? Was Marta going to ask for a divorce? I scrolled further back and found my answer. They'd been discussing Marta's exit strategy for weeks. She was planning to file for divorce after the first of the year, claiming irreconcilable differences and asking for half of everything. Her lawyer, a friend of Victoria's apparently, had assured her that she'd get primary custody of the kids and substantial alimony. They had it all figured out. While I'd been fixing faucets and helping with homework and trying to be a good husband, my wife had been planning the systematic destruction of our family. The shower was still running upstairs, so I kept reading. What I found next made me physically sick. Marta and Shaun weren't just planning to end my marriage. They were planning to humiliate me in the process. They'd discussed telling people that I was emotionally abusive and controlling. They'd talked about spreading rumors that I had drinking problems and anger issues. They wanted to make sure that when the dust settled, I'd be the villain and Marta would be the poor woman who'd finally escaped her terrible husband. The key is to get people on your side before he knows what's happening, Shaun had written. Once the narrative is set, it's hard to change. I've already started dropping hints to some of the other moms at Amelia's school, Marta had replied. Nothing too obvious, just little comments about how stressed I've been at home. They're very sympathetic. I felt like I was going to throw up. Not only was my wife cheating on me, but she was actively working to destroy my reputation and turn our friends against me. She was poisoning the well, making sure that when she finally left, everyone would think I deserved it. The shower turned off upstairs, and I quickly put the phone back where I'd found it. By the time Marta came downstairs in her robe, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a beer, pretending to read the newspaper. "You're up late," she said, getting herself a glass of wine. "Couldn't sleep." "Too much coffee today, I think." She sat down across from me, and for a moment she almost looked like the woman I'd married. Her hair was damp from the shower, and she wasn't wearing any makeup. She looked younger, softer, more like the person I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. "Evan," she said quietly, "are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean with us, with our life. Are you happy?" I studied her face, looking for some sign of genuine concern or regret or love. What I saw instead was calculation. She was testing me, trying to figure out if I suspected anything. "Are you?" I asked. She sighed and took a sip of her wine. "Sometimes I feel like we're just going through the motions, you know? Like we're roommates instead of husband and wife." "Is that how you see us? As roommates?" "I don't know. Maybe. We don't talk anymore, not really. We don't do anything together. When's the last time we went on a date or took a trip or even had a real conversation?" The irony was staggering. She was complaining about our lack of intimacy while she was having an affair with her boss. She was criticizing our communication while she was secretly planning to destroy my life. "We could change that," I said carefully. "If you want to, do you? Do you really want to work on us? Or are you just saying that because it's what you think you're supposed to say?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and tried to figure out if there was any part of her that actually wanted to save our marriage. What I saw was a woman who'd already moved on, who was just going through the motions until she could make her exit without looking like the bad guy. "I think we should try," I said. She nodded, but her heart wasn't in it. "Maybe we could see a counselor or something. Would you want to do that? If you think it would help." But even as she said it, I could see her mentally composing the text message she'd send to Shaun later. "Had to pretend I wanted to work on my marriage tonight, the things I do to keep him from getting suspicious." "Let's think about it," I said. She finished her wine and stood up. "I'm going to bed." "Don't stay up too much longer." She kissed the top of my head, just like she had the night I'd first discovered her messages. The same gesture that had once felt loving now felt like a performance. After she went upstairs, I sat in the kitchen for another hour, trying to figure out what kind of man I wanted to be. The kind who fought for his marriage, even though it was already over? The kind who confronted his wife and demanded the truth, even though she'd just lie to his face? The kind who hired a lawyer and tried to beat her at her own game? Or maybe I was going to be the kind of man who let his wife think she was getting away with it, right up until the moment she realized she wasn't. The next morning, Marta left early for her weekend work retreat with Shaun. She packed a small overnight bag and kissed me goodbye, like she was actually going to miss me. "I should be home tomorrow evening," she said. "Call if you need anything." "Have fun at your retreat," I said. After she left, I made breakfast for the kids and tried to act normal. But Ross, who was more observant than I gave him credit for, picked up on my mood. "You okay, Dad?" he asked over his cereal. "Just tired. Work's been stressful lately." "Is Mom okay?" "She's been acting weird lately." My heart broke a little. If Ross had noticed something was wrong, then Marta hadn't been as careful as she thought. "What do you mean, weird?" "I don't know. Just different, like she's thinking about something else all the time. She's been working on a big project. Sometimes adults get distracted when they're stressed about work." Ross nodded, but I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. Kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. They pick up on tension and changes in routine and the little ways that people act when they're keeping secrets. "Dad?" Amelia appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why would you ask that? Some of my friends' parents got divorced and they all acted like you and Mom have been acting lately. Like they were being extra nice to each other, but also kind of fake. I sat down at the table and looked at both of my kids. They deserved honesty, but they also deserved to have their childhood protected for as long as possible. "Your mom and I are going through a rough patch," I said carefully. "All married couples do sometimes. But we're trying to work things out." "But if you can't work things out, you'd tell us, right?" Ross asked. "You wouldn't just pretend everything was fine until one day you announced you were splitting up?" "We would never do that to you guys. If your mom and I decide we can't make our marriage work, you'll be the first to know. And no matter what happens between us, nothing will ever change how much we both love you." Both kids nodded solemnly, and I could see them processing this information. They were smart enough to know that something was wrong, but young enough to hope that their parents could fix it. I wished I could give them that hope. I wished I could believe it myself. But as I watched Marta's car disappear down our street, heading toward her romantic weekend with Shaun Beck, I knew that some things couldn't be fixed. Some things could only be survived. The weekend dragged by with agonizing slowness. I kept myself busy with household projects and spent time with the kids, but part of my mind was constantly wondering what Marta and Shaun were doing at their romantic retreat. Were they hiking through mountain trails, holding hands and planning their future together? Were they lying in bed at some quaint bed and breakfast, laughing about how easy it had been to fool her stupid husband? By Sunday evening, I was a wreck. I'd barely slept, barely eaten, and I'd snapped at both kids for minor infractions that normally wouldn't have bothered me. When Marta's car pulled into the driveway at 7 o'clock, I felt a mixture of relief and dread that made my stomach churn. She came through the front door looking refreshed and happy, with a glow that I hadn't seen in months. Her cheeks were pink from mountain air, and she was wearing hiking boots and casual clothes that made her look 10 years younger. "How was your retreat?" I asked, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "Oh, you know how these work things are, lots of team-building exercises and brainstorming sessions. But I think it was productive." She was a good liar. If I hadn't seen those text messages, I would have believed her completely. The kids missed you, I said. I missed them too. She dropped her overnight bag by the stairs and headed toward the kitchen. Is there anything for dinner? I'm starving. I made spaghetti. There's plenty left over. As she heated up her plate in the microwave, I watched her carefully. She was acting completely normal, chatting about the weather and asking about the kids' weekend activities. There was no sign of guilt or awkwardness or any indication that she'd spent the last 2 days cheating on her husband. Marta, I said when she sat down to eat, we need to talk. Something in my tone must have alerted her because she looked up sharply from her plate. About what? About us. About our marriage. About where we go from here. She set down her fork and studied my face. Okay, what's on your mind? This was it. The moment of truth. I could confront her about the affair and demand an explanation. I could tell her I knew about Shaun and the text messages and the weekend retreat that wasn't really a work retreat. Or I could try a different approach. I think we should separate, I said. The words hung in the air between us like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Marta stared at me with her mouth slightly open, clearly not expecting this conversation to go in this direction. What? She said finally. I think we should separate. Maybe get divorced. I don't think either of us is happy anymore. Evan, where is this coming from? I know we've been having some problems, but have we? Have we been having problems, or have we just been pretending everything is fine while we both think about being somewhere else? She was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. This wasn't part of her plan. She was supposed to be the one who initiated the divorce conversation after she'd finished setting up the narrative that would make me the villain. I don't understand, she said. Yesterday you were talking about marriage counseling and now you want a divorce? I've been doing a lot of thinking this weekend. About us, about what we want, about whether we're just staying together out of habit. And you decided we should get divorced? Just like that? I decided we should be honest with each other. Are you happy, Marta? Really happy? When you wake up next to me in the morning, is that where you want to be? She looked down at her plate, and for the first time since she'd walked in the door, she seemed genuinely uncomfortable. Marriage is complicated, Evan. It's not always about being happy every single moment. I'm not talking about every single moment. I'm talking about the big picture. Do you want to be married to me? The question seemed to catch her off guard. In her mind, she was the one who was supposed to be asking for a divorce. She was the one who was supposed to be unhappy and unfulfilled. I was supposed to be the clueless husband who begged her to stay and promised to change. I don't know, she said quietly. It was the first honest thing she'd said to me in months. Then maybe we should figure that out, I said. Maybe we should take some time apart so we can both think clearly about what we want. What about the kids? We'll figure it out. People get divorced all the time. Kids survive. She was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. I can't believe you're saying this. I thought you wanted to work on our marriage. I did. I do. But it takes 2 people to work on a marriage, and I'm not sure you're really interested in doing the work. That's not fair. Isn't it? When's the last time we had a real conversation? When's the last time we did anything together that didn't involve the kids or household logistics? When's the last time you seemed genuinely happy to see me? She didn't have answers for those questions, which was answer enough. So, what are you proposing? She asked. I think one of us should move out for a while. Give us some space to figure out what we really want. You want me to move out? I think it makes more sense for me to move out. The kids should stay in their house, in their rooms with their routine. I can find an apartment somewhere nearby. This was definitely not part of her plan. In her version of events, she was supposed to be the one who left, taking the kids with her and leaving me alone in our empty house. She was supposed to be the brave woman starting a new life, not the wife whose husband had given up on their marriage. Evan, I think you're being hasty. Maybe we should try counseling first, like we talked about. Do you want to try counseling? She hesitated just long enough to give away the answer. If you think it would help. I think it's too late for counseling. How can you say that? How can you just give up on 17 years of marriage without even trying to save it? The irony was incredible. She was lecturing me about giving up on our marriage while she had Shaun Beck's contact information saved in her phone with a heart emoji. I'm not giving up, I said. I'm being realistic. We're not happy together, Marta. We haven't been happy for a long time. Maybe it's time to admit that and figure out how to be happy apart. She started crying then, which surprised me. I hadn't expected tears. Anger, maybe, or relief that I was making this easy for her. But not tears. I don't want to get divorced, she said through her sobs. Why not? Because I love you. Because we have a family together. Because marriage is supposed to be forever. The words should have made me feel something. Relief, maybe, or hope that we could work things out. Instead, I just felt tired. Do you love me, Marta? Or do you love the idea of being married? Do you love our family, or do you love the security of having someone to pay half the mortgage and help with the kids? How can you ask me that? Because I need to know. If we're going to try to save this marriage, I need to know that you actually want to be married to me, not just married in general. She wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been desperation. Of course I want to be married to you. You're my husband. You're the father of my children. We have a life together. But she still hadn't said she loved me, not really, not in a way that sounded like she meant it. I think I should start looking for an apartment this week, I said. Evan, please, can't we at least try counseling? Can't we give it a few months before we make any big decisions? I studied her face, looking for some sign that she was being genuine. What I saw was panic, but not the kind of panic that comes from potentially losing someone you love. It was the panic of someone whose carefully laid plans had just been derailed. Okay, I said finally. We can try counseling. But I still think I should move out temporarily. Give us both some space to think. If you move out, people will know something's wrong. There it was. She wasn't worried about losing me or breaking up our family. She was worried about what people would think. People already know something's wrong, Marta. We're not as good at pretending as we think we are. She didn't argue with that, which told me everything I needed to know. I'll start looking for a place tomorrow, I said. She nodded miserably, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered those text messages, and the weekend retreat that wasn't really a work retreat, and all the lies she'd told me with such casual ease. And I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. I found a furnished apartment across town within 3 days. It was nothing special. A generic one-bedroom in a complex that catered to divorced dads and young professionals who couldn't afford anything better. But it was clean and quiet and mine, which was all I needed. Moving out was harder than I'd expected, not because I was sad to leave, but because of how the kids reacted. Ross tried to act like it didn't bother him, but I caught him wiping his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Amelia was more direct about her feelings. "This is stupid," she said, sitting on my bed while I packed clothes into a suitcase. "You and Mom are being stupid." "Sometimes adults need space to figure things out," I said, repeating the explanation we'd given both kids. That's what Jessica's parents said right before they got divorced. I sat down next to her on the bed. "Amelia, I can't promise you that Mom and I are going to work things out. But I can promise you that no matter what happens, we both love you and Ross more than anything in the world. That will never change. But everything else will change." She was right, of course. Everything was going to change, probably in ways that none of us could predict yet. "Some things will change," I admitted. "But the important things, how much we love you, how proud we are of you, how much we want you to be happy, those things will stay exactly the same. She hugged me then, and I held her tight and wondered how I was going to explain to my children that their mother was a liar and a cheater without turning them against her forever. Marta helped me load my car, playing the role of the supportive wife who was sad to see her husband go, but understood that this was necessary for their marriage. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed the performance myself. "Call me if you need anything," she said, as I got ready to drive away, "and we should probably set up that counseling appointment soon." "I'll look into it," I lied. My first night in the apartment was strange. The silence was different from the silence at home, less familiar, less comfortable, but also less loaded with tension and unspoken resentments. I ordered pizza and watched a movie that Marta would have hated, and for the first time in months, I felt something that might have been peace. That feeling lasted exactly 12 hours. The next evening, I was unpacking boxes when my phone rang. It was Pete Morrison, my friend and coworker, and he sounded agitated. "Evan, man, I need to talk to you about something." "What's up? Are you sitting down?" "Pete, just tell me what's going on. I saw Marta tonight at Russo's downtown. She was with some guy I didn't recognize." Russo's was an expensive Italian restaurant that Marta and I had been to maybe twice in our entire marriage, both times for special occasions. It wasn't the kind of place you went for a casual dinner. "What did the guy look like?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. Good-looking guy, I guess. They looked pretty cozy, if you know what I mean." "How cozy?" "Like holding hands across the table cozy. Like she was feeding him bites of her dessert cozy." I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. Less than 24 hours after I'd moved out, Marta was already on a date with Shaun Beck. She wasn't even trying to be discreet about it anymore. "Evan? You still there?" "Yeah, I'm here." "Look, man, I know you guys are having problems, but I thought you should know. If my wife was out with another guy while we were trying to work things out, I'd want someone to tell me." "Thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Or I will be." After I hung up, I sat in my empty apartment and tried to figure out how I felt about this development. Angry, certainly. Betrayed, obviously. But also strangely relieved. Marta had just made this whole situation a lot simpler. I called her cell phone. She answered on the 4th ring, and I could hear restaurant noise in the background. "Evan, is everything okay?" "I was just calling to see how you were doing. You sounded upset when I left today." "Oh, I'm fine. Victoria and I decided to go out for dinner. You know, girls' night out. Another lie, delivered with the same casual confidence as all the others." "That sounds nice. Where did you go?" "Just that little Mexican place by the mall. Nothing fancy." "Well, I hope you have a good time. Tell Victoria I said hi." "I will." "Are you settling in okay?" "Yeah, the apartment's fine. I'll talk to you tomorrow." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, thinking about the woman I'd been married to for 17 years. When had she become such an accomplished liar? When had deception become so easy for her? More importantly, what was I going to do about it? I could confront her about the dinner with Shaun, but what was the point? She'd just deny it, or make up some excuse, and we'd have the same conversation we'd been having for weeks. Me knowing the truth and her pretending I was paranoid. Or I could take a different approach entirely. I opened my laptop and started researching divorce lawyers in our area. If Marta wanted to play games, I could play games too, but I was going to play to win. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day meeting with attorneys. The third one I talked to, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Coleman, seemed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. "Your wife is planning to file first," she said after I'd explained the situation. "She wants to control the narrative and put you on the defensive. It's a common strategy." "So what do? We file first. Today, if possible. We cite adultery as grounds and ask for primary custody based on her infidelity and deception. Do I have enough evidence? The text messages you saw would be helpful, but we need more. Do you have access to her phone records? Credit card statements? Any documentation of her relationship with this Shaun Beck? I thought about the hotel receipts I'd seen, the mysterious charges on our joint credit card, the weekend work retreat that had actually been a romantic getaway. I might be able to get some things. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position will be. Your wife clearly thinks she's got this all figured out, but she's made some mistakes. She's been careless. What kind of mistakes? Using joint credit cards to pay for dates with her boyfriend, going to public restaurants where people might recognize her, leaving a paper trail that connects her to him. She's acting like someone who thinks her husband is too stupid or too trusting to figure out what's going on. She's not wrong about the trusting part, but she was wrong about the stupid part. And that's going to cost her. I left Patricia's office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved, that ship had sailed, but hope that I could protect my kids and my future from the woman who'd been systematically planning to destroy both. That evening, I drove back to the house to have dinner with Ross and Amelia. Marta was there, of course, playing the role of the devoted mother who was bravely holding the family together while her husband figured things out. "How's the apartment?" she asked over meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "It's fine. Quiet." I bet. It must be strange, being alone after all these years. There was something in her tone that bothered me. Not sympathy or concern, but something that sounded almost like satisfaction. "I'm adjusting," I said. After dinner, I helped the kids with their homework while Marta cleaned up the kitchen. When it was time for me to leave, she walked me to the door. "Evan," she said quietly, so the kids couldn't hear, "I've been thinking about what you said. About us taking time to figure out what we want." "Yeah?" "I think you might be right. I think we both need to explore what makes us happy." The words were innocent enough, but the way she said them made my skin crawl. She was asking for permission to openly date Shaun Beck while still being technically married to me. "I think we should both focus on figuring out what's best for our family," I said. "Of course. The kids come first." But even as she said it, I could see her mentally planning her next dinner date with her boyfriend. "I'll see you tomorrow," I said. As I drove back to my apartment, I thought about the conversation I'd just had with my wife. She thought she was so clever, manipulating me into giving her the freedom to pursue her affair while keeping me on the hook as her backup plan. What she didn't know was that I'd already filed for divorce that afternoon. What she didn't know was that Patricia Coleman was preparing a case that would expose every lie she'd told and every secret she'd kept. What she didn't know was that her carefully constructed plan was about to blow up in her face. And I was going to be there to watch it happen. The divorce papers were served on a Thursday morning while Marta was getting ready for work. I know this because Ross called me 20 minutes later, his voice shaky with confusion and fear. "Dad, there are police at the house." Mom is crying and screaming about some papers. "What's going on?" I was at my office, pretending to work while actually waiting for this exact phone call. "I'll be right there," I said. The scene at the house was everything I'd expected, and more. Marta was standing in the living room in her bathrobe, holding the divorce papers and looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Victoria was there too, having apparently rushed over when Marta called her in hysterics. "How could you do this?" Marta screamed at me the moment I walked through the door. "How could you file for divorce without even talking to me about it?" We did talk about it. We talked about separating and figuring out what we wanted. I figured out what I wanted. "But you said we were going to try counseling." "No, you said we were going to try counseling." I said I'd think about it. She was scanning the papers frantically, and I could see the exact moment when she found the part about adultery. Her face went white, and she looked up at me with something that might have been fear. "This is insane," she said, but her voice had lost its angry edge. "You're claiming I committed adultery?" That's ridiculous. Is it? Yes. I've never cheated on you, Evan. Never. The lie came so easily that for a moment I almost believed her myself. She was looking right at me, tears streaming down her face, swearing that she'd been faithful to our marriage. Then you won't have any problem proving that in court, I said. Victoria stepped forward, clearly trying to play peacemaker. Evan, maybe you two should sit down and talk about this calmly. There's no need for lawyers and court battles. Actually, there is, I said. There's a very big need. What's that supposed to mean? Marta asked. Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and played the audio recording I'd made of her conversation with Shaun Beck 2 weeks earlier. I'd followed them to another restaurant, not Russo's this time, but a quiet wine bar downtown, and sat close enough to their table to record their entire conversation. Marta's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. I can't wait until this whole charade is over. Evan is so pathetic, thinking we're going to work things out. He has no idea that I've already talked to a lawyer. Shaun's voice responded, Just a few more months, baby. Once the divorce is final, we can stop sneaking around. I know, but it's getting harder to pretend I care about saving our marriage. Last night he actually suggested we plan a vacation together. Can you imagine? The recording went on for another 5 minutes, documenting their affair in excruciating detail and revealing their plan to manipulate the divorce proceedings in Marta's favor. By the time it finished, Marta was sitting on the couch with her head in her hands. Victoria was staring at her sister like she'd never seen her before, and I was standing in my living room, finally telling the truth after months of living with lies. You recorded us? Marta whispered. I recorded a conversation that took place in a public restaurant. Perfectly legal. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself. And our children. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Evan, please. I know how this looks, but it looks like you've been having an affair with your boss while planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for. It looks like you've been lying to me, to our kids, and to everyone else for months. It looks like you've been spreading rumors about me being abusive and controlling to set up your narrative for the divorce. That's not... I never said you were abusive. Really? Because I have a recording of you telling Jennifer Martinez that you were walking on eggshells at home and that you were afraid of how I might react if you tried to assert your independence. Her face went even whiter. She'd forgotten about that conversation. Probably because she'd had so many similar conversations with so many different people. I was just venting. All wives complain about their husbands sometimes. All wives don't systematically destroy their husband's reputation while planning to leave them for another man. Victoria finally found her voice. Marta, is this true? Have you been having an affair? Marta looked at her sister, then at me, then at the divorce papers in her hands. For a moment, I thought she might continue to deny everything, even with the evidence literally speaking for itself. Instead, she started crying again. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said. It started as friendship, and then it became something more, and by the time I realized what was happening, I was already in too deep. How long? Victoria asked. 6 months. Maybe 7. Jesus, Marta. I know how it sounds, but you don't understand what it's like being married to someone who takes you for granted. Evan never pays attention to me anymore. We never talk. We never do anything together. We're like strangers living in the same house. So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it? I asked. I tried to talk to you. I tried to get you interested in doing things together, in working on our marriage, but you were always too busy or too tired or too distracted. When? When did you try to talk to me about our marriage? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again, because she couldn't think of a single specific example, because it had never happened. That's what I thought, I said. This is all wrong, she said, looking around the room desperately. This isn't how this was supposed to happen. How was it supposed to happen, Marta? You were going to file for divorce first? Claim I was emotionally abusive? Turn our friends and neighbors against me? And then ride off into the sunset with Shaun Beck while I paid alimony and saw my kids every other weekend? She didn't answer. But she didn't need to. We both knew that was exactly what she'd been planning. Well, here's how it's actually going to happen, I continued. We're going to get divorced, but you're not going to get primary custody of the kids. You're not going to get alimony. You're not going to get half of our assets. What you're going to get is a chance to explain to Ross and Amelia why you chose your boyfriend over your family. You can't keep my children away from me. I'm not keeping them away from you. I'm making sure they have a stable home with a parent who puts their needs first. If you want to see them, you can have visitation. Supervised visitation, at least initially. Supervised? You think I'm a danger to my own children? I think you're a danger to their emotional well-being. I think you've shown incredibly poor judgment, and I think you need to prove that you can be trusted to put their needs ahead of your own desires. Marta looked at Victoria, clearly expecting her sister to come to her defense. But Victoria was still staring at her like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Say something, Marta pleaded. What do you want me to say? Victoria asked. That it's okay that you cheated on your husband and lied to your children and planned to destroy your family? Because I can't say that, Marta. I won't say that. You, of all people, should understand. You know what it's like to be in an unhappy marriage. I know what it's like to be betrayed by someone I trusted, and right now, you're the one doing the betraying. Marta turned back to me, and I saw something in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Not love or regret or even anger, but calculation. She was trying to figure out if there was still a way to salvage her plan. What do you want? She asked. I want a divorce. I want primary custody of our children. I want you to move out of this house. And I want you to stop lying. And if I agree to all of that, then maybe we can keep this civil. Maybe we can co-parent effectively. Maybe our kids won't have to choose sides. She was quiet for a long time, weighing her options. I could practically see her running through scenarios in her head, trying to figure out if she had any leverage left. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been defeat. I need to call my lawyer, she said. You do that. But Marta, make sure you tell him the truth this time, because if you don't, I will. She gathered up the divorce papers and headed upstairs to get dressed. Victoria lingered in the living room, looking shell-shocked. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I should have said something sooner. I should have tried harder to stop her. It's not your fault, isn't it? I knew what she was doing, and I did nothing. I told myself I was protecting the family, but really I was just protecting myself. I didn't want to be responsible for another marriage falling apart. The marriage was already falling apart. You didn't cause that. But I could have prevented some of the damage. I could have convinced her to end the affair, or I could have warned you about what she was planning. Maybe. Or maybe she would have just been more careful about hiding it. Victoria nodded, but I could see the guilt eating at her. What happens now? She asked. Now we figure out how to tell the kids that their mother chose her boyfriend over her family. Now we figure out how to co-parent with someone who's proven she can't be trusted. Now we figure out how to move forward. And Marta? Marta figures out whether she wants to be a part of her children's lives or if she'd rather play house with Shaun Beck. As if summoned by his name, Marta's phone rang upstairs. Even from the living room I could hear her answering with a tearful, Shaun? Thank God you called. Victoria and I looked at each other, and I saw my own disgust reflected in her eyes. I should go, she said. You can stay if you want. This is still your home until you find that apartment. No, I think I need to find somewhere else to stay. I can't be here for this. I understood. Victoria was caught between loyalty to her sister and disgust at her sister's actions. She needed space to figure out how to navigate this new reality. After she left, I sat in my living room, soon to be just my living room again, and listened to my wife upstairs, crying to her boyfriend about how her mean husband had ruined their carefully laid plans. In a few hours, I'd have to sit down with Ross and Amelia and explain why their mother was moving out and why their family was falling apart. I'd have to find words to help them understand betrayal and divorce, and the fact that sometimes the people you love most are capable of hurting you in ways you never imagined. But for now, I just sat in the quiet house and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. It was over. The lies, the pretending, the constant feeling that I was living someone else's life. All of it was finally over. And for the first time in a long time, I could see a future that didn't involve walking on eggshells or wondering what my wife was really thinking or feeling like a stranger in my own home. It wasn't the future I'd planned, but it was honest. And after months of living with lies, honesty felt like the most precious thing in the world. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Marta moved in with Shaun Beck and saw the kids every other weekend, just like I'd predicted. She tried to maintain the fiction that she was the victim in all of this, but the evidence was too overwhelming, and her lies too well documented for anyone to believe her version of events. Ross and Amelia adjusted better than I'd expected. They were hurt and confused, but they were also resilient in the way that kids often are. They understood that their mother had made choices that hurt the family, and while they still loved her, they also understood why she couldn't be trusted the way she used to be. As for me, I learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened to you. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, smarter than my wife had given me credit for, and capable of building a life that was truly mine. And I learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most comfortable lie.